This is a little insight into character maintenance that goes on when you're playing Call of Cthulhu and it has been a little bit too much, a little bit too often.
Yeah, repeatedly.
And so we've reached the point where it's time to talk about what the game defines as a period of temporary insanity. And the game gives us the opportunity to have this represented momentarily. So we've been through this a few times, and then we get to the indefinite insanity, where there has been enough trauma that something about the character's personality or the way that they interact with the world is pushed into a state of change. This could be something classic like paranoia or a heightened state of fear or fear of a particular object or obsession with a particular object. These kinds of behaviors as symptoms of the underlying trauma. So that's the state where we are now with Alex Thornton, who has had, let's say, an unforgettable time in his basement.
It's a good way to put it.
Now, what the sixth edition of Call of Cthulhu advised, and some editions before that, is that whatever condition ends up becoming a part of the portrayal of the character, it should flow logically from events, right? Random tables are provided for other purposes, such as generating non-player characters, populating an asylum, or in lack of any clear sense of what the trauma should manifest as in play, you could always pick or roll from the chart, without if you had no other option. But what it recommends is that the keeper of arcane lore come forward with a suggestion, and the player come forward with a suggestion, and they figure out what is the most appropriate way to represent these effects in the character, right? So that it still feels like the Lovecraft source material from which it's drawn. Like why does this character never want to leave their room? And why are they doing specific things to the layout of that room to protect themselves from the thing that they fear? What's driving them? Right? So um, that kind of motivation. And so, as you can see, I'm here with Brian to talk about Alex Thornton, our agent of the Prohibition Bureau in Boston, who's had a number of minor shocks over the course of the campaign so far, but has had a major one recently. So, Brian, what were your thoughts about what would be a logical reaction to these losses?
Well, kind of the first thing that really came to mind was something that really had been touching on, kind of peppering it throughout our play, was the sense of paranoia. Um, I brought it up several times because of the coincidences that just seem to happen. People seem to always be in the right place at the right time to do certain things, or there was information that people knew about Alex without me ever having encountered them for the first time.
They
Uh,
must be watching me.
yeah, they must be watching me. And then there are a couple of instances where I had seen what looked to be someone watching the house on more than one occasion, not within the same night, but within the same week. Uh, and so there was definitely that was kind of seeping in. So I kind of kept pulling it along, not really trying to push it out in front, but at least keeping it pulled along because of what was occurring.
Right.
As someone kind of all of a sudden dropped into something a lot larger than what he first thought it might be. Right, this
Sure.
investigation of the books, and now all of a sudden everything just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's not grown exponentially, but it's gotten more intense as time has gone on.
Right. Now, the counterpoint to this is that you're not paranoid if they are watching you.
Yes. Yeah, you're just hyper aware of the fact that you are looking out for the observer who is in the room that is looking at me intentionally and
Right.
repeatedly.
Right. So this is the direction that my thoughts went.
Okay.
And there's an entry in the Sanity section in Call of Cthulhu 6th edition which suggests an idea called noesis. And what it posits there as this particular effect is a sudden illumination, a sudden realization, right? A falling together of experiences and facts that leads you to the inescapable conclusion that in the world, which is not a delusional world, right? Not like
Mhm.
the character believes that they're Napoleon or the character believes that they're St. Jerome, to quote
Yeah.
Ghostbusters, right? But all of their experiences are pointing them to the inescapable conclusion that they, as themselves, as they actually are central to those events. They're
Yeah.
not one character, they're not one person among many. They look out, they understand other people's positions. They have this sense of empathy. They can put themselves in other shoes. They can imagine other people in their world, and they realize because of all the things that are happening, they must be this central figure. It
Yeah.
really is all about me.
Well, there's, and I don't know if this is, maybe it's just a bit of synchronicity, you know, because one of the things they talk about, noesis, the subjective aspect of the act of an intentional experience distinguished from neomia. When you look at that, some of the definitions around noesis, and then you look at the Knight of Swords. So when you look at the interpretation of the that tarot card, uh, and also this is a little bit of hindsight, you can, I agree that it's definitely that kind of feeling that without purposely doing it, just playing the character, the card matches the character. He's been very intentional. He's been very action orientated. Uh, he has been somewhat aware or tried to keep in his awareness of the effect of his actions that could affect other people, right? And that kind of came to a head in our Thornton Diner episode, which I don't believe is out yet, so I'm not going to talk anymore about that. Uh,
It's in the editing queue right now.
okay, there's a lot of stuff between these two that's very fitting, and like I said, not intentionally trying to play the character that way to the card's definition, but just playing Alex as Alex.
Right.
It's really worked out very well. Uh, what I'm curious to know is, I mean, when you're playing solo, you kind of are a central character already, right? There's no other players at the table. If there is another character involved in the story, then they're a non-player character. And so is this just coming from a strictly a belief aspect, a realization that he is in the zeitgeist all of a sudden, so to speak? Or
Well,
is it, or is
that's the question, isn't it?
the question, okay. Or should it, or would it be, or should it be portrayed more from heightening the effect of being the central character?
I think this is where we may have to take it, right? The,
Okay.
um, in order to mark it as a scar of trauma, how does Alex change? And this is a recoverable trauma. This is
Yeah.
something that, through painstaking character action and involvement over time, they can find the way to maybe not toward healing, but toward a a healthier place for them.
Hmm.
So if Boston is in as much peril as what you've uncovered suggests, in a very real sense, something has got to be done. And I believe the effect of this particular trauma then would be something has got to be done, and you are the one called to do it.
Yeah.
And there's
It-
lots of
it-
evidence to support to support
yeah.
that
Oh
conclusion.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and again, that is also something that fits very well with the Knight of Swords. Even being a minor arcana card, uh, it fits very well with that definition and that kind of mode. Uh, the idea of charging into action and being intentional about it. Uh, the first thing that comes to mind is uh, a change in his relationship with Xavier because he's been avoiding him. I mean, there was like four sessions between let's call it first contact and the phone call. I believe maybe it was 5, but it was several days there. uh, Almost a week had passed because he was purposely avoiding seeing
Right.
him again, even
He had
though,
the phone number for quite a while, and
oh yeah, and kept avoiding the call, kept avoiding. And in fact, I went to Alex was good. In hindsight, this is really coming together. Alex was having other people do the legwork on Xavier,
right,
whereas Alex was more focused on what happened to
doing things.
Steve,
Yeah.
doing the looking at the books, trying to do that part of it. Uh, so
Yeah. So that
maybe,
that made this particular thing leap out
yeah,
at me.
maybe uh, it would be, it's time for Alex to charge forward because he knows that he's got this meeting coming up with his father that he remembers that Xavier's now using the family firm, and it feels ripe for confrontation. Speaking about it on a meta level, that it's time for him to, because one of the things I know I'd brought up was, what did I say? What did Alex say? He called me a knight, but that doesn't mean I'm a white knight. A black knight can break the rules. So there is a more sense of increased recklessness. I mean,
or
there's still the
or
ambition,
daring.
daring. Yes, I did see that in there, some daring. Although I don't know if we'll be dangling from the back of any silver planes or anything. But
Don't put yourself down. I'm sure if you try hard enough, you can
sure,
find a way
kind
to
of,
dangle out of the back of an airplane.
you know. I mean, that's kind of how it feels. It feels like it's time for Alex to start not asking but demanding some answers. I shouldn't be in the dark anymore. Down here in the basement, that's kind of the realization, right? You're down here in the basement. It's dark. I shouldn't be in the dark anymore. I need to have a light shined on what's happening so I know how I can intentionally go about instead of fumbling a little bit. Oh, well, there's this news article here, or I was fed this information about you'll see a sign, and now it's time to step forward and take a more active role instead of, not that Alex has been being passive, but there
But I
is,
think in a lot of these games, when we're put in the situation of choosing some kind of condition for the character
yeah,
to experience, the tendency is to always go for one that diminishes them, right? They used to be this way, but now they're afraid of this thing, or now they've got all this anxiety or whatever.
yeah,
But I think we can also see cases in, around us in the world where some particular characteristic is magnified. It might be an unpleasant characteristic that's
Yeah,
magnified, a defensiveness or an aggressiveness, or
aggressiveness. Yeah,
that kind of thing. So this
which
aspect, of Alex's personality, um, that knightly characteristic, could be
yeah,
magnified as a response. Uh,
yeah. There's a
and
lot of fitting
yeah,
material here. There's a
yeah,
you're talking about the aggressiveness, uh, his boxing history, that being, because when we opened up and we were at the gym, uh, it was, Alex just goes there to work out. He never became a a top ranked fighter, uh, and so there is a way to see that kind of aggressiveness come out to where, uh, because if we look at the night upside down, right, uh, it's an opportunity that was missed, right? He had a chance, he had an opportunity, which could also lead into something, and maybe this is getting a little bit further down the road, but that schism with the family. That is something that we know is still coming. You and I know is still coming, uh, which may also be heightened by this, because now not only do I know that, I'm trying to think of the calendar. It's less than a week until that Friday appointment with Dad,
right.
and
Our
so
next, our the last session we played,
yeah,
Alex loses consciousness in the basement, and so this is an interesting metaphor for me. So in the darkness, he falls into darkness, and
yeah,
while we could have this wonderful metaphor of him, climbing the stairs of the basement out of darkness into the light, when he recovers his consciousness, he'll be in the light. The transition is done without him, but he wakes up,
yeah.
right? He wakes up this changed character, right? And
Hmm.
this is that that schism, or that break, or that effect of trauma. It's not that he's
Okay.
becoming something. He's not transitioning into. He's not taking a role. He wakes up as the same man with a different understanding of his
This.
task, if that
Okay.
makes sense. So when
No,
I
no, it
when I
does.
look at
Yeah.
Alex the boxer, right, he was pushed by the limitations of nature into a very defensive,
Yeah.
right. So the more aggressive boxers are pounding, and he's deflecting, he's bobbing and weaving, he's dancing out of range. But again, the limits of nature meant he couldn't do that long enough to do the Rocky thing
Yeah.
and win in the 100th round.
Yeah.
Right. He never became a contender.
Yeah.
And we can think about the heavily armored knight who's protected from from harm, and yet also still very vulnerable and limited in certain capacities, right. um, Heat, exertion,
Mhm.
and is the knight a soul? Is it the knight errant, or is it the knight in the charging line of jousters? This is an interesting conundrum. And is it a white knight or a black knight? Or
Yeah.
is was the card on the desk, as you raised to me
Yeah.
earlier, was the card right way up or inverted,
Or inverted. Yeah.
or was it sideways?
Yeah. Oh, I know. I don't want to go too far into the, like, oh, what kind of reading was it and everything, and
Yeah.
all that, but it just provides some good chewable information to help with the transformation, you know.
Right.
Uh, but there's this series of events that are coming up that would be, I think, are pretty good to help highlight this effect, right? Uh, the appointment with Dad, uh, making the decision to stop being defensive about confronting Xavier and what's going on, to start demanding knowledge, if I'm going to be a part of this, then I really need to be a part of this. I can't be on the outside anymore. And if I'm going
Makes
to be a
sense.
knight, you know, it's two good events that can kind of help highlight that change.
Right.
And they're very different, right? One is a familial relationship, and one is, for lack of a better way to put it, a professional relationship, right?
Yes.
Uh, wherein, the other thing will be, and this is because of the hot mess of everything that has happened in the last, 3 days, 4 days, which, will come to light. Uh, what's it going to be like when I go back to the office with Bill? Because here I am. I've done something to injure myself. I'm trying to talk about the session without talking about the session, so we'll get really meta.
Well,
I've
this
done,
this will come out after the episode with the basement comes out, so you don't have to worry
yeah.
about spoiling
Oh,
anything.
okay. So I've injured myself by probably somewhere between a high first degree burn going into a second degree burn by shoving my hands into the furnace to try and burn the head. Again, there's also that sense of paranoia that, because one of the last things Alex sees before he passes out as the session, curtain closes, is the burial of the body in my basement. And on a meta level, I know as a player, she's a murder victim. As far as I know, they never found her body. So yeah, she showed up at my house. There's this paranormal supernatural stuff happening, but did someone see her come to my house is still a thing that is going to pop into Alex's head. And it's, oh crap, should I dig it back? Should I dig the body back up? Do I need to get it out of my house? If they came to my house, how obvious is it going to be? So there's a little bit of a sense of paranoia about that, because now,
How much do you trust Malone?
yeah, well, how much do I trust Malone? And Kyle is here. And I know Kyle is quote unquote the page and all, but he did confess, if I recall correctly, that he doesn't know what his card is.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a question there. And so from that, it can be, how does the relationship of the knight compare with that card? And at least knowing that Malone is also minor arcana, Knight of Pentacles,
Yes.
if I recall correctly. Yeah, Knight of Pentacles. So Weir, even though he definitely seems more empowered, so that is definitely something that makes Alex worry about. Am I fit? And so now I need to ask Xavier, how is it that he is able to do this and I am not? If we're supposed to be on the same level, we're both minor arcana. How is it he is so more powerful of a knight than I am? What is it that I need to do? What do I need to confront? What do I need to know to move to that next stage of knighthood? Right.
Right.
So I
Fantastic
can,
question.
yeah,
So,
Sally Ford.
do you then embrace this idea of this is how the character is affected?
Yeah, no, I embrace it because it's a challenging idea, and I've got time because I'm pretty much clearing my schedule for Wednesday, so there's nothing for me. I except we were gonna have a talk. Me and Sameoldji were gonna talk about the book, but we're gonna do that after, because I told him
Right.
usually we're probably said sometime after noon, lunchtime for me would be good if we can get together to do that, because I want to have the whole morning cleared. Uh,
For horror.
I don't know. I don't know. The last session that was pretty horrific. Uh, that session was pretty horrific. I mean, as a scene, it is a bit more. We talked at one point. We talked about how we felt about how the horror was going in the game, right?
Right.
Uh, it didn't feel like a gore film. right? I didn't feel, and it didn't feel B movie horror, so no, it didn't feel Reanimator, uh, or From Beyond.
Not schlocky or exploitative.
Yeah, not schlocky or exploitive. Uh, it did have a decent amount of tension, mostly due to dice rolls. Because what I think it was like 4 or 5 rolls, uh, 2 of which were only successful uh, in pitched combat in the basement in the near dark. Uh,
Right. And lots of wide ranging effects, sanity wise.
yeah,
It was hard on Kyle, hard on Alex.
yeah, and repeated. That was probably the first session I think we've had where it was more than one in a session, and both of them were very close together.
Right.
Right? They were all pretty much within the same scene, so to speak, the same event in the basement.
Yeah.
So,
which is why we're having this conversation.
yeah. But yeah, I think it feels somehow appropriate in a very Campbellian way. Because of what's happened. I mean, this is literally going down into the cave and coming back with, descending into the underworld and then coming back with knowledge, right?
Right. I think this is a thought that Alex himself could have.
Yeah. That this isn't that it's more for real than what I thought it was before. I had, the horror, just the 3 series of events all together. The encounter at the diner, the encounter in my living room, the encounter in the basement. There is no way around it that this is not real. I am not insane. This is not just made up. And I am not the only one who is bearing witness to it.
Right.
So it's very fitting. I know that sense of paranoia is not really going to go away, especially with a body buried in my basement, but that'll be good to draw. Yeah.
You're not paranoid if they're really watching you.
I know. Well, that bent on paranoia is more about the good cop getting caught and blamed for a bad thing that he didn't do, right?
Yeah.
As far as when you think about it in a meta sense on a story level, that's that kind of paranoia. Yeah. I know the body's down.
Yeah, if you think about the O'Shaughnessy's, if you think about a brute like Mickey and the way that he maintained loyalty and fear on the street, and if you ask yourself the question, how did they get so many dirty cops? It couldn't just be the money.
Yeah.
So how many of these guys on the force found themselves with this kind of situation?
Ability? Yeah. That's true. No, that's very true. And the same thing from Xavier's side too, right? Because one of the things he had said, when we first met, he was talking about, well, I don't really need an accountant. I don't really need a psychologist, but there was definitely something that he did need.
Right.
And so now I think it's going to take me a minute to wrap my head around, but there's plenty of time. And I'll probably wind up doing a couple of reviews on some of our sessions to try and pick some stuff out and go through my notes.
Yeah, there's interesting stuff there, like that particular conversation. I don't need this, and I don't need this.
Yeah.
And then you're allowed some time to think about it. You go all the way back to the office, and there's what he does need sitting on your desk. I need a knight. Do you pick this up or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did it get there?
So I'm game. I'm totally game for it.
Cool.
I'm totally game for it. Right. And when we start working through this, I'm definitely going to be I'll definitely be looking for some feedback. Right. Because this is trying to, you're still trying to play in character as character, but now it's trying to make an intentional and conscious choice of moving in a specific direction and really
or
bringing that change
or
out.
what things mean.
Yeah,
Like prior to this change, prior to this condition arising in Alex, a murder was a murder.
yeah,
Now the murder is connected to you.
yeah, yeah.
It's a it's about you, right? It requires your response, that kind of thing. Um, you are
I'm
the
just sure.
central point. So Alex's personality doesn't change, his abilities don't change, his
Yeah.
view of the world doesn't change, except for this one core thing: is that events show that you have been called.
Well, and that's what I mean. So, still kind of thinking it in that Campbellian sense, it's not a change in personality.
Yeah,
I mean, I definitely understand that. It's definitely not a change in the necessarily the way he conducts his business, but it is still a bit of a transformation, not necessarily a full metamorphosis into something else. Like you
right,
said, it's more of a heightening of,
right,
what he might do. And so that's what I'll kind of be, we'll probably, when we have like the after session discussions or things like that, I'll probably be asking questions like that. Like, do you think
right.
I was pushing that too far? Or
Or
do
far
you think
enough.
I
Yeah,
are
it's a
far
subtle
enough?
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to do something like a phobia or an anxiety uh,
Oh, definitely.
affect
Yeah.
than
Yeah. I
something like
mean,
this.
it's a little bit more easily understood, right? It's very almost cut and dried. You are afraid of X, right?
Yeah,
Or whatever it might be. But
right.
it's definitely subtlety is definitely a little hard to do sometimes, you know.
And notice.
But I'm up. Yeah, I'm up for the challenge.
Cool. All right.
Definitely up for the challenge.
Well, let's think on it for a couple of days until we can play on Wednesday. And like I
Okay.
said, it'll be a while before this particular video appears. But these are the kinds of conversations that have gone on. I just haven't really been able to show them, right? So when we have Terrence
Yeah.
McSweeney's slide into paranoia and some of the ways that has been manifesting as a defensiveness, a desire to explain himself, and also a desire to reject, right, to push himself out of that focal point.
Hmm.
So these long speeches uh, from Terrence as he's just kind of, that didn't happen. It didn't happen like this, and it didn't happen that way, and that's not what that meant, and it all kind of falls together. So yeah, okay. Until next time, take care.